All right. Good day, everybody. Hope that you're all doing well. Apologies for the late start. ESCOM just came back on now. But yeah, here we are. And welcome to this AutoCAD webinar on the use of tool palettes in your workflow. My name is Jacobus Oberholster. I'm an AEC technician with Micrographics, and I'll be taking you through the process today. All right, so without further ado, if you want to look at your tabs up here, it's actually hidden in quite a strange tab in my mind, but if you look under the View tab, you'll see there is the Tool Palettes command. And once you open or click on this command, actually pulls your, well, it actually pulled it over onto the other screen, but so just be mindful of that. But here you'll see the actual Tool Palettes window. And what you'll note here is that there are multiple palettes within this window, and these different palettes are filled with all sorts of symbols, commands, hatches, text objects, and all sorts of good stuff that's really just aimed at making your workflows a lot simpler. So I'm just going to go through the basics of the tool palette, how to set it up, and what some of these features can do. And then we'll move over into creating our own custom tool palette and adding symbols, our very own symbols, to that tool palette, setting it up and how it all works. And then finally, we'll move over just into a little introduction into dynamic blocks, because you won't have your tool palette and the tools within without using blocks. All right. So if we just look at the tool palette itself, what's really nice is that you can dock it. I think I am going to struggle to dock it just at the moment, just with with the streaming software running. But nonetheless, you can dock it anywhere on your UI. And then what's really cool is that once left there, if you open up a new drawing, it will be there. Okay, that's very cool. So you don't have to actually, jumped to another drawing there. You don't actually have to select anything else but open the tool palette, and it will appear on all of your drawings in the relevant AutoCAD version. Okay, so the changes you make in AutoCAD 2023 won't necessarily or won't be present in AutoCAD 2024 unless you've actually migrated all of those custom settings. Okay, so within the palette itself, if you right click, so by not selecting one of these two items or by not selecting an item, and you right click, you have additional options. So auto hide, transparency, view options, sort by, and then add text, add separator, new palette, delete palette, rename palette, and then custom palettes and custom commands. So those are pretty self-explanatory, but what we can do is just look at add text. So what it does, it creates a split between those two tools, and you can rename that, let's just call that other for argument's sake. So there's that, and what you can also do is add a separator, which adds that line there, and that just helps with a bit of clarity in your tool palette, and this will be way more applicable to your custom tool palette than anything else. Okay, so we can delete that. Yes, and we can delete that as well. Okay, so if we look at these different tools, just scrolling through the different palettes, the tools with a little thunderbolt there indicates that it is a dynamic block. So what happens is if I select that block or that tool and I place it here and I click on it, you'll see there's a little drop down there. It actually has multiple views from within that little drop down. You can see here, it's quite simple to change it. Change it to a shrub. Okay, so just that makes sense, and that's the same for every single one of these symbols with a little thunderbolt there. So same under mechanical. If you just think, if you place a hex nut, You click on it, you'll see there's a drop down, and you actually have your metric sizes there. All right, I think that's very, very cool. And then what you'll look at further down, you also see additional symbols without that little thunderbolt there, which means that they're not dynamic. They're just standard blocks, which means if you click on them, they are what they are here. So now if you take one of these tools and you add them to your drawing, if you want to edit this actual cross section, there's really no way of editing it as the block itself unless you go into the block editor. But going into the block editor, if you change anything here, it will change this actual tool. If you just want to add this and maybe add something, a customized portion of it or anything like that, what you can do is you can explode it. It will still have all of its constraints. You can remove those constraints as well, but now you can change this. So whether you are manufacturing now a custom I-beam with a much thicker top flange, you're able to do that. You must just remove those constraints. But actually in this case, it is quite helpful. So yeah, adding a thicker top flange, etc., whatever you'd like to do, you are able to do that now. And what's nice is that when you've exploded it, it dereferences it basically, or it breaks off that connection between the symbol or this entity and the actual block itself or the actual tool. So if you add this again, you'll see that that change was not carried over. Okay, so let's get into creating a custom tool palette. So what we're going to do here is we're going to right click, we're going to say new palette. And for the sake of this webinar, we're going to call this PFD, so process flow diagram. So if you want to change it, so what you can do again is you can just right click and say rename palette. We can call that process flow. And then I'm just going to change it back to PFD again. Okay, so as mentioned before, beyond the actual blocks that you can add, you can also add commands. So I'm just going to show you the difference here. So if I take the line command and I draw a line there, if I say Control C and Control V, what you'll see, what it's added is the actual line command itself. Okay, so it hasn't added that specific line with its dimensions and its positioning, or more so its dimensions than its actual positioning. So if I want to add this line itself, so this line with the specific dimensions, what I'll need to do is I'll need to go to Insert, click on Create Block. Here's the block definition window. Call that diagonal line. Base point specify on screen. Objects, let's say select objects. Click on it, press Enter, and then everything else is fine. I can click OK. Insertion point will be in the middle. And now this is a block. So it means there's nothing I can do in this current state unless I go into the block editor to actually change the dimensions of this entity now. I can move it around, but that's pretty much it. If I draw in another line, what you'll see is if you click on this line, you'll see under the geometry options, you'll see quite a few properties here. If I click on the block, you'll see those are significantly less and it looks quite a bit different. So if I now take this entity or this block, I press Control C, I press Control V there. Okay, so that just means I need to save the drawing. All right, so Control C, then Control V. And there you see, there's the diagonal line. So if I click on this and I add it there, then it's matching that original block. And I can add as many of them as I want and as easy as clicking on that tool and adding it. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Just as a difference between adding commands and adding actual entities or blocks. Just going to delete these. Yes, delete these. Yes. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to look at is just some additional tools that I've created, some custom tools. And what I've done is I've just looked at some symbols that are used within process flow diagrams. And what you'll see is a centrifugal pump, compressor, boiler, heat exchanger, crusher, open tank, and you can add as many of these as you want or create as many of these as you want. But you'll see that these are already blocks. So I drew in these symbols as you would draw in anything within AutoCAD. I gave it a name underneath there, which is just text that I've added. I selected all of it and I created a block. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these ones into this drawing, and then I'm going to select each one of them, press Control C and Control V. All right, so I must save again. So just remember, every time you bring in items that are blocks and you want to add them to the palette, you need to save your drawing. So I press Control C, Control V, and there you go. There's the centrifugal pump tool now added to the PFD tool palette. So under compressor, Control C, Control V, boiler, Control C, and Control V. And just to note, you can't add multiple different blocks at the same time. So if I select all of these, I press Control C and Control V, you'll see nothing happens. All right, so you need to add each one of them individually. Okay, and there you go. So I've added all of them now as tools within the custom tool palette. I can also add them to existing palettes if that's what I would have liked to do, but it's nice to create a custom tool palette just so that you know exactly that all the tools are there as you want them and that the original palettes are as they were when you first installed the software. Okay, so what this means now is that I can just click on that tool and I can place an exact copy of this tool right here, or this block right here. And that counts for every single one of them. And that's really, really nifty. You don't have to go to another drawing, copy and paste them into an existing drawing onto a new drawing. You just open up your palette, your tool palette, you go to your PFD custom tool palette, and here they are. So now, if I go and I open up a new drawing, you'll see that here they are still. I didn't need to press anything or go through any sort of command workflow to export them or anything of the sort. As long as it is in the same version of AutoCAD, those blocks, when you've added them to the tool palette, will be present in all of your future drawings, which is really, really cool. And what's nice is you can migrate these changes, you can migrate them to other versions of AutoCAD. You can even share that file amongst employees. And that can really create just some uniformity in drawings. So if you think of your section arrows and all those sort of things, all of that is very, very easy to actually set up. It's really worthwhile to spend the time in doing it. And yeah, it's actually something that more and more rating as a really, really cool tool. And I'm actually excited to bring out a more advanced or do a more advanced workflow in the future with another webinar. So stay tuned for that. I think the potential is significantly more than even just what it seems at the moment. Okay. So what we're going to do now is going to take you just through the process of creating a symbol or a block that you can add to the custom tool palette. And what we're going to do is just something very, very simple. It will be a grating, so floor grating. And yeah, we're going to just go through the process of creating that grating, creating that grating, and then adding it to our tool palette. And then I'll also take you through the process of creating a dynamic block or changing it to a dynamic block. But that is quite an extensive topic, and we will definitely be getting into that in future webinars and videos. So yeah, please do like and subscribe to our page, and just set that bell so that you get notified when new stuff gets posted online. All right, so I'm going to do something really simple. So just a 500 by 500 grating. Oops. And then the spacing between those ones will be 50s. So there's your grating. You can think of this as a floor panel of sorts, but this is your grating right here. And now you don't want to have to copy and paste this over every single time you create a new drawing. If you think of your standardized gratings from the Red Book, you can create those sort of things and add them to your custom tool palette. So as is, this is just made up of many, many different entities at the moment. And I can honestly, there's nothing that's keeping me from editing it and changing it. But now, in order to add this as a tool to the tool palette, I need to change it to a block. So I'm going to select it from the start. I click on Create Block within the Insert tab. And I'm going to name this Floor Grating. Okay, I'm going to specify my base point on screen. Do I want this annotative? Not within this exercise, but you can set it behavior as annotative, and then you can also set that it allows exploding or not. So just thinking of within your company, if you actually don't want people to edit or change or make use of these blocks and explode them and change them, so you want to keep uniformity, you don't want one of the guys to change the spacing with this or to modify this part in any way, just again, if you explode it, it won't update the actual tool, but you can set it that you actually can't explode this block. Okay, so we're going to keep it as that. I'm going to say okay, and let's keep it right in the center. And now you'll see when I click on any part of this entity, it selects the entire entity. So now, just as before, I need to save, click on the entity or click on the block, Control C, Control V, and there is your floor grating. So I think what would be easier actually is if you set the insertion point to another part of, so let's just see if I can redefine. Let's go block editor. I'm going to change that base point. Let's just see quickly. Or create a point even. So let's just set this base point to there. Close. We save changes. Now, if I add one again, you'll see there it's on that corner. It'll just make snapping or positioning it so much easier than actually having to, place it and then move it, etc. And as you can see, it even snaps to all around, which at this moment is quite frustrating, but I'm sure there are cases where it will be quite useful. Okay, all right. So now, lastly, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through a short process of making this a dynamic block. If you just take you back to items such as the hex nut, or let's take better the I-beam, clicking on it and then getting that drop down, or even other commands where you're able to stretch it and so forth. All of that happens within the block editor. So I'm going to click on this, click on block editor. That's the one I want. And I'm going to open this up. All right. So the first thing, I'm just going to put this on the side. Sorry. Just get that. Let's just move that a bit. Okay, that's all right for now. So what we're going to do is we need to add our references, or what they would call, I just want to see where this now is. Oh my goodness, yes, I put it on the other screen. Of course, be mindful of that. Okay, so we're going to look at our parameters. This is very important. You need to place your parameters first before you can add actions to them. So I'm going to use the X and Y, and I want that to be my base point. And there I've specified now the extent of those dimensions. And now if I go to actions, I can click on scale. I can select the parameter. I can select all of these objects, and I can press enter. All right. So what I need to do next is to click on this XY parameter, and what you'll see here is underneath the properties, you'll see that there's a value set. Okay, and then there's horizontal type, and then vertical type. And what you want to do is the easiest one to work with is list. Just click on list there and click on list there. And once you click on this within this little bubble here or this text box, you'll see there's a little additional button that becomes available there. You click on that and it allows you to add additional values. So what we're going to look at is, say, let's want a 1,000 and then 1,500 for the horizontal offsets or scales, or positioning rather, not scales. It doesn't actually scale it by 500 or 1,000. It just scales it up to that dimension, and we'll do exactly the same for the vertical value. So we're going to add 1,000, 1,500, and we're going to press OK. So now I'm going to close my block editor. I'm going to save these changes. I want this to be open again. And when I click and I want to drag it, what you'll see is those lines, and then it actually scales up this grating in aligned to those specific values and not beyond. Okay, so this is not the neatest of dynamic blocks. You can do a heck of a lot more, and I'll just show you a few more tips and tricks with these on another drawing. But this is, you can actually set in the generic or the manufactured sizes, and then that can all be part of one tool. So you'll have a drop down, you can click, and you can click on the set available sections or sizes that there are. Okay. And that whole change, or that dynamic change or function added to the specific tool, is now available in this tool. So every time I place it, I'll be able to do this. Okay, so even if I go to new drawing, that will be available when I place this tool. Now if we just go to this one, I'm going to close this editor. Sorry. If we look at this bolt here, for instance, just to show you another cool way of using those dynamic block features. If you look at this here, right here, this is just an entity made up of multiple lines, or well, actually just multiple entities. What I want to do first and foremost is I want to create this and call this a hexagon bolt metric. Okay, so everything's been selected. I'm going to do is specify the insertion on screen. I want that right there. And now what I can do is I can go to the block editor. All right, so this has already been constrained, so I don't need to do that. What is available to you is the AutoConstraint function. So you click on that, you drag over all of the objects, and you press enter, and there you go. Okay, so I want two things. I want the length to change based on what just based on what I need. So I'm going to place, I'm going to place a what you call a parameter, so a linear parameter in this case. The number of grips will be 1, so that's a grip right there. Okay, so the grip will allow you to either extend it into the left-hand direction or right-hand direction until you change it. So I'm just going to keep to 1 grip here. And then I'm going to add an action, which is going to be stretch. I'm going to select the parameter. Says specify parameter point to associate with action or center. So that's going to be that one right there. You see that red cross. Specify first corner of the stretch frame. So this you just stretch over the entities that you want to stretch with the command, and then you do the same inside that stretch frame and select those objects. You can select other objects as well. You don't have to select the ones that I'm selecting now, but that's just for this example. This is what I'll be doing. And then you press enter. Okay, so now secondly, what we're going to do, we're going to go to our value set under the properties of that linear parameter. We can look at the distance type, go to list, and then if we can think of other values, so I'm just going to say 75, 80, 90, 98, 105, for example. Okay, so as you can see, there's the extent of that stretch right there, just indicated within the block editor. Excuse me. And then what we'll look at as well is I want an alignment parameter, and I'll show you what that does shortly. It's actually very, very cool. But so I click on alignment, it says specify base point of alignment, so that's going to be the middle there, and it specify alignment directions. As you can see, as I drag out from that point, it's two symmetrical lines extending from that center point, and that's it. All right, so that's what we want to do here. I'm going to say close block editor, save changes, and here is that newly modified dynamic block. If I click on that little grip there, you can see I can extend it, which is really, really cool. What you can also do is you can modify the block so that the threaded portion is actually defined by a formula, so that because this would be quite odd to have a bolt with such a long shank. But that, like I said, that's a bit more in the advanced category of dynamic blocks, and we will be covering it in the future, definitely. So secondly, what I want to show you is also just that alignment there. So what I'm going to do, so just going to quickly draw in up two plates. Okay, we're going to keep that there. Just trim that one off as well. That'll be a nice little center line. And this is let's just measure this one quickly. This would be an M10. Yes, that's an M10. So it's a 12 mil hole. These ones will be hidden lines. And then what I'm going to do, just to make it easier, I'm going to delete, well, just delete that top one for now, so that I can snap to its middle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this block, click on that alignment, and there you go. It aligns to whichever entity you try to align it to. Just like that. So now it's been positioned, and I want to make it shorter, for an example. Okay. So yeah, that's about it. I hope that this has tickled your taste buds a little bit for our future webinar and future videos on dynamic blocks as well. I think the tool palettes the tool palette functions are quite easy to understand, but it really is just made exceptionally more powerful by making use of dynamic blocks. And like I said, this will now be present in every single one of the drawings that you work on in that specific version of AutoCAD. So if I've saved it now, copy and paste, and now that is available in every single one of the drawings. So even if I open up a brand new drawing, I can put that bolt right there with all of its available functions, which is really, really cool. So yeah, thank you so much for all your time. Thank you for just tuning in and yeah, just seeing what all of this is about. Really appreciate your time, and feel free to get hold of us at info@mgfx.co.za. So just check in the comments below, or in this description of the video below. Everything will be there. But love to hear from you if you have any additional questions. If you have anything you would like to see in a future video as well, please pop it in the live chat, or leave it as a comment. Yeah, I'd love to see what ideas you have just for future videos or webinars. And then, yeah, you'll definitely get a shout out if we do that one. But yeah, thank you again, and all the best. Julia, I checked there in your just in the chat. Will there be a text or blog version of this live webinar? Um, so what will be available is there is a recording. There is a recording on this, but to put this in a blog is quite extensive. What I will think about is actually just what I could say, condensing it and making it more concise, and then putting that as a text or a blog. So yeah, have a look out for that. I think just with the tool palette portion, it will be simple enough to put into a blog. All right, just to check if there's any final questions, please pop them in the live chat. Otherwise, that will be the end of this webinar for today. All right. Well, thank you again, and hope you have a fantastic week, and we'll hopefully see you soon in some of our future webinars.